And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. Do want to thank R&B Car Company, locations in South Bend and Warsaw. R&B Car Company are your used car experts, and they are now the proud owners of a lot of my money because my wife roped me into buying her a new car. So we went to R&B Car Company and bought one while I was on vacation. So I don't know how you all spend your vacations, but mine apparently entails me spending lots of money on other people and not myself. That's typically how it goes. Now watch what ends up happening when the thing that I ordered gets here on Wednesday, the thing that I ordered that costs like $300. Watch what happens when that gets here versus the many thousands of dollars that I spent on her car. Watch. I know that none of you can see it, but I guarantee you there's going to be a dramatically different reaction to this. All right. So again, realnewsmichiana.com. Thank you to Clifton French for joining us. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but his phone apparently just disconnected from us. But the story is there. It'll also be in the daily show prep on my website at theburningtruth.us. Everybody out there in the audience sent me this video. I was getting this video nonstop for the past several days, and I had already had it in the docket to play. I'm working on actually getting this person on the show. Right outside of, let's see, where is this? Mount Vernon Community School Corporation, okay? This is in Indiana. Mount Vernon Community School Corporation. A doctor spoke before the school board. Now, this is longer than I usually play audio for, but I want you to listen to what this doctor had to say. What this doctor has to say is what a lot of doctors and a lot of infectious disease experts and epidemiologists and things like that have been saying for the entire pandemic that I have been telling you. And while everybody tells you one side of things, I've always felt that it was responsible for me to tell you what other experts are also saying, especially when we start to see what the Fauciites out there are telling you doesn't seem to be working or lining up with historical realities when it comes to infectious disease. And most of you know I was giving Fauci the benefit of the doubt for an extended period of time until he made his comments about hydroxychloroquine. At that point, I knew it's it. I was operating under the premise that this is a guy who's socially awkward and is doing the best that he can to kind of steer clear of the political aspect of it. And he's just an egghead scientist. And egghead scientists don't look at anything other than the task that they've been given in the test tube in front of them. But that became pretty clear that I was wrong about that, and Fauci was just, well, Fauci. But what is important is that these other experts in the field all over the world have had a dramatically different opinion than Fauci and local health officials in the United States and in the UK and in Australia and in New Zealand. And it is important that people understand that. And as you get some longevity into the pandemic and you start realizing, hey, they're not all wrong. It actually seems like a lot of the stuff that they have said have come true. We know that definitely a lot of it has come true. Well, maybe we want to sit there and listen to them. So I want to play some of this. Because I don't have time, I don't think, to play all of it. But I want to play some of it. I want you to listen to what he has to say. This is a doctor, again, speaking at Mount Vernon Community School Corporation school board meeting in Indiana. Have a listen.
Dr. Dan Stock, 5777 West 7 in North McCordsville, Indiana. To address your comment about, gee, it's hard to believe we're 18 months into this and still having a problem, and I would suggest the reason we still have a problem is because we're doing things that are not useful, and we're getting our sources of information from the Indiana State Board of Health and the CDC, who actually don't bother to read science before they do this. I'm actually a functional family medicine physician. That means I am specially trained in immunology and inflammation regulation. And everything being recommended by the CDC and the State Board of Health is actually contrary to all the rules of science. So things you should know about coronavirus and all other respiratory viruses: they are spread by aerosol particles, which are small enough to go through every mask. By the way, the literature that supports all of that is in a flash drive that we presented to you. It's been given to the secretary. As a matter of fact, it quotes at least 3 studies sponsored by the NIH to that exact fact, even though the CDC and the NIH have chosen to ignore the very science that they paid to have done. That is why you keep struggling with this, is because you cannot make these viruses go away. The natural history of all respiratory viruses is that they circulate all year long, waiting for the immune system to get sick through the winter or become deranged, as has happened recently with these vaccines, and then they cause symptomatic disease. Because they cannot be filtered out and they have animal reservoirs, and this is a very important point, no one can make this virus go away. The CDC has managed to convince everybody that we can handle this like we did smallpox, where we could make a virus go away. Smallpox had no animal reservoirs. The only thing it learned to infect was humans. That's why we were able to make that virus go away. That will not happen with this any more than it will with influenza, the common cold, respiratory syncytial virus, adenoviral respiratory syndromes, or anything else that has animal reservoirs. So the reason you can't do this is because you're trying to do something which has already been tried and can't be done. Equally important is that vaccination changes none of this, especially with this vaccine. And I would hope this board would start asking itself, before it considers taking the advice of the CDC, the NIH, and the State Board of Health, why we are doing things about this that we didn't do for the common cold, influenza, or respiratory syncytial virus. And then ask yourself, why is a vaccine that is supposedly so effective having a breakout in the middle of the summer when respiratory viral syndromes don't do that? And to help you understand that, you need to know the condition that is called antibody-mediated viral enhancement. That is a condition done when vaccines work wrong, as they did in every coronavirus study done in animals on coronaviruses after the SARS outbreak, and done in respiratory syncytial virus, where a vaccine used in a vulnerable individual done the wrong way, which cannot be done right for a respiratory virus which has a very low pathogenicity rate, causes the immune system to actually fight the virus wrong and let the virus become worse than it would with native infection. And that is why you are seeing an outbreak right now. In fact, in that flash drive you're going to have coming to you and in the emails with 6 Extra will be a study showing that 75% of people who had COVID-19 positive symptom cases in Barnstable, Massachusetts outbreak were fully vaccinated.
Now, we went over that before I went on vacation. We've gone over that. It's over 50% of the fully vaccinated people in Israel have had breakthrough infections. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to clarify some stuff before you all go run out and either attack me or spread rumors of what I've said when I wasn't saying it. But this is a doctor who is testifying in Indiana before a school board, and that was half of his testimony. The full testimony is in the Daily Show prep today at theburningtruth.us. But I want to address a couple of things because he mentioned, you can't really trust the CDC on this. And a lot of stuff got published when I was on vacation that corroborates that. We'll talk about that coming up. Newstalk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. Newstalk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. Want to thank R&B Car Company, locations in South Bend and Warsaw. R&B Car Company are your used car experts. When you go to R&B Car Company, make sure you let them know that I sent you. They will certainly remember me spending a lot of money over my weekend over there. Over my vacation, I should say. But good people, gave us a great deal. Good car, has almost no miles on it. So I'm pretty happy with my experience over there. All right, we got to go over just a couple more things. And I promise, look, here's the deal. I could spend the entire week on COVID. I will not. But there was a lot of new data that got released over my vacation. And I don't know how much of it got covered, what did or didn't get covered. And without sounding like I'm an egotistical maniac, be perfectly honest with you, I don't trust anybody, even my friends like Matt, with covering this data because it's not exactly something that is consistently covered. So it's one of the reasons that I do it. Now, there was a study, preliminary study, that was released recently. It was released like the day after I went on vacation that said they believe that the vaccine may have caused a mutation to make the Delta variant. Now, you should understand that there's tons of fact checks out there that say that's not true. None of those fact checks have any idea if that's true or not. I don't know that this study is accurate. I'm just letting you know there has been a preliminary study that has been released. And preliminary studies don't mean much, okay? It's not a peer-reviewed study or anything like that. It may end up being nonsense. It could be that the sample size is just, the way that it was, and that's the result that they got, but they can't duplicate it. I'm just letting you know that that is out there. Now, why is that important? Well, they're pushing everybody to get vaccinated, and there is a possibility, according to some researchers, that that has caused a mutation into a, lack of better terminology, a super COVID, okay? Delta is not super COVID. It's just more infectious, but it's far less deadly, in spite of what the media is telling you. That's what all of the data shows everywhere you look in the world where Delta is prevalent, including in the United States. Be thankful we're still at record low deaths. Infections are going up. I hope that the record low deaths thing stays record low deaths. But right now, as it stands, we're still at the death rate right before everything really ramped up in the pandemic. So that's great news, and hopefully it stays that way. But there is some research out there that suggests that perhaps the vaccines caused a mutation in the virus. This is nothing new in the world of virology or infectious disease. So it's not controversial to even say that. It is imperative that everybody understand this. This is basic virology 101 stuff. And you start having vaccines, the virus adapts to those vaccines, changes its form, just like bacteria with antibiotics, okay? It's the same premise, right? So I'm not telling you that that's what happened. I am telling you that there are some researchers out there that are suggesting that that is a real possibility. There are also a lot of infectious disease experts who have now suddenly showed up on social media platforms that are not Facebook and that are not YouTube, who are saying the exact same thing. And they're using history and basic virology as their guide for this. So there is a chance, and I'm not saying that this is happening, but there is a chance that the push to vaccinate everybody is actually what gave us the Delta variant. And that may not even be a bad thing. Remember, we always knew we were going to get to a point where it was less deadly but more infectious. That's a good thing. That's a step in the right direction. If COVID turns into the seasonal cold, fine. Everybody should be happy with that. The point is we want COVID to not kill people. Luckily, it's killing way less than it used to. And primarily that is because the population that is most vulnerable has already been run through with the virus. So as I've told you many, many times, it's going to start looking for additional hosts, and that is exactly what the virus has adapted to do. Where I start to have some issues, again, is with natural immunity versus the vaccinated. People who have natural immunity, people who have had COVID and recovered from COVID, can we call ourselves COVID survivors? Is that like a thing? I feel like I should, just to be a jerk, even though like 99% of people survive COVID, but I feel like I should. Like I'm a COVID survivor. I heard that they're going to make statues of us and stuff like that. So at some point, I expect a national holiday that gives me an extra day off of work, okay? I expect that to happen just because I'm a COVID survivor. But for those of us who have survived COVID, the research globally has been universal. 100%. People who have recovered from COVID have better immunity than fully vaccinated people who have never had COVID. Well, when I was on vacation, the CDC decided to drop their own study, and their study says the exact opposite. How convenient. We'll talk about that next. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
Casey Hendrickson.
News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
Your breaking news and what.
And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. Look, here's the deal. I'm going to make you a promise. Even though I think I counted 43 other COVID stories that I could do today, I will only finish out this last 9 minutes with COVID. Then we're going to do other stuff, okay? Just making you that promise, but there's a lot that happened. So let me just start off with this. COVID-19 vaccines offer more protection than previous infections, according to a new study. Now, the reason that this caught my attention is, well, one, you want to cover all of the research that is coming out about this, but the reason that this caught my attention is this is the only study that says that. Every other study done everywhere else in the world, including in the United States, says the opposite. So what could possibly be the reason that this study now says getting fully vaccinated is better than natural immunity from COVID. And then you read, oh, this was a CDC study. The CDC commissioned this study and used researchers from the University of Kentucky. Now, again, this goes back to what I was saying before I went on vacation. One of the reasons that people are not buying into anything the CDC or Fauci says anymore is because they have been caught repeatedly lying to people or being wrong. Because sometimes they weren't lying, they were just wrong. So I find myself in a position where I'm looking at it going, all right, what's the motivation here? And on a normal Wednesday, when there isn't a pandemic, I would look at it and go, there wouldn't be any motivation for the CDC to say this. But now with the CDC pushing universal vaccinations and the CDC and Dr. Fauci saying once the FDA approves the Pfizer vaccine by Labor Day, that vaccines will become mandatory across the country. When I see that, and the current NIH director saying he supports mandatory vaccinations, and the CDC is pushing that in spite of what the science has been saying for months now, I find myself not believing it. Part of the reason that I don't believe it is because the CDC is untrustworthy, and the CDC has a dog in this fight to tell you to get vaccinated. But the other part that I don't believe it is literally every other study says the opposite. For example, so you got the CDC study. Don't accuse me of not telling you about it. You got the CDC study that only came out after every other study came out and said, no, natural immunity is way superior to fully vaccinated. Now, for the record, if you're in the danger category, I still recommend you get vaccinated. Okay? But that's just my personal opinion and my personal recommendation. You have to make those decisions for yourself, and nobody should mandate that you do one thing or the other. But if you're in a danger group, it's probably wise to get vaccinated. Most people who are going to have a serious reaction to COVID will not be vaccinated. Then again, if you're in a group of people who will likely not have a serious reaction to COVID, you may be a higher chance of having a serious reaction with the vaccine. You have to weigh those risks with your medical professionals that you trust. That's not something for me. That's not something for any other radio or television personality to tell you. That is something that you have to weigh for yourself with the expert advice that you believe, okay? Nobody else. No bureaucrat, no politician, no news person or celebrity. That's something that you choose to do. But when the CDC comes out with something after a new study shows natural immunity is 700% greater protection than getting fully vaccinated. That's a government study from Israel. Data suggests vaccines make limited difference in infectiousness of Delta variant. Okay. Here's another study. Recovered COVID patients do not benefit from the vaccine. All right. Now that's an American study too. Some of these are American and some of these are Israeli. Some of them are I think there's a French one in here. A study, vaccinated people can carry as much virus as others. In fact, experts in Israel, they had a verbal spat with Dr. Fauci publicly right before I went on vacation. And the reason for that is Dr. Fauci went on television and said people who have been fully vaccinated are spreading the virus as much as people who have not been vaccinated. So Dr. Fauci said this. So Dr. Fauci is going out there basically telling you if you're fully vaccinated, you're still spreading COVID all over the place. You might be less likely to have a serious reaction yourself, but you're still spreading the virus to other people. Whereas Israel, their government scientists came out and said, our research shows that that is not true at all. That people who are fully vaccinated can still get the virus, but they're not spreading it to other people because they're basically asymptomatic. So who do you believe? Dr. Fauci, who has been wrong and is admitted on 2 occasions to intentionally lying to everybody in order to get them to comply with his edicts, or the government of Israel, which is the first fully vaccinated country in the world who exclusively used the Pfizer vaccine? Because they're saying the exact opposite. And there's a whole lot of people that are going, well, Fauci's right because he's Fauci. I don't know. I've got an entire team of people over here in a very scientifically proficient nation of Israel. We're not talking about scientists from Nicaragua or something. We're talking about Israel. And their medical sciences are extremely advanced. They're considered some of the most advanced in the entire world. So who do I buy into? You got all of these studies that are out there saying, hey, natural immunity is way better than being fully vaccinated. And people who have recovered from COVID do not benefit from getting the vaccine. And for the record, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't get the vaccine if you've had COVID. That is a choice that you have to make for yourself. And I'm fine either way. It doesn't really bother me. But I've always been having, most of you know this, I've had an issue with people who are recovered from the virus being treated as if they were equally at risk of dying, being infected, being hospitalized, or spreading COVID as people who are fully vaccinated, when the research has always shown the opposite. And the only research that we have that says being fully vaccinated is better than natural immunity, the only one happens to have come after all of these other studies are published, and it's coming from the one body that is pushing universal vaccinations, which, again, the question has been from the very beginning, why are you pushing universal vaccinations? It doesn't make scientific and medical sense. And there's a ton of infectious disease experts and medical doctors all over the world, and lots of them in the United States, who have made this very public and very clear. It doesn't make any sense to push for universal vaccinations. Johns Hopkins experts, again, right before I went on vacation, it does not make sense to require everybody to be vaccinated. Now, you've heard both sides. I've given you my opinion on which side I think is probably the most trustworthy of the bunch, but ultimately that's a decision that you have to make for yourself. If you want to believe the CDC and ignore literally everybody else in the world, including other prominent researchers in the United States, that's your prerogative. That's not where I'm going. I tend to go where most of the evidence is because I'm an evidence-based person. A lot of folks aren't, and that's okay. You make the decision that is best for you. But at the end of the day, the CDC has made it crystal clear their mission in life is to get everybody vaccinated. And conveniently, they commission a study where they come out and say everybody has to be. I'm not sure I buy that. More coming up next.
WTRC FM and HD1, Niles, South Bend, Elkhart.
News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
Your top stories right now.